Thank you. Of Americans has raised a high barrier before the prospective American homeowner. 5 years ago, an FHA mortgage cost below 5.5%, and even conventional mortgages cost only 5.8%. Today, these rates are close to 7%, and in some localities, approaching 8%. What this means, in the plainest of terms, is that the $20,000 house 5 years ago, financed over 30 years, now costs $6,300 more in interest payments and $3,700 more on construction costs, a total increase of $10,000 over the life of the mortgage. And I think that's unsatisfactory, and the trend is obviously unsatisfactory here in our country. Thus, the wage earner, for the middle-income businessman or the professional, for the teacher and the insurance broker and the technician and the assembly line worker, the dream of owning a good home, the dream of what they planned and what they saved, has been placed further from their grasp than ever, not by personal failure, not by personal misfortune, but by spiraling housing costs. Those same costs have made it harder to build and sell homes, and harder to find jobs for those to build them. That is why housing starts are off 20% here in Indiana, and why in most of the country, homes are harder to sell now than they have been in years. As comfortable housing in general becomes harder to find, the shocking state of housing for the poor continues as it has been in the past, and in most of our community even gets worse. The typical American of goodwill, living in comfort and surrounded by the overwhelming evidence of the good life, does not see or come in touch or contact with the other America. But make no mistake, it exists. 9 million of our housing units are dilapidated or deteriorated in America. And of every 5 of our homes, and 1 out of every 5 of our homes and apartments, as many as half of our elderly citizens live in units which are substandard or inadequate. 40% of American Negroes live in dilapidated housing or in housing which lacks decent plumbing, and in some cities, that figure rises to 50%. Yet unfit housing knows no color, for twice as many whites occupy unfit housing as do Negroes. This problem is not confined to great cities. Slowdown in housing starts that is taking place at the present time. And I believe that we can move in certain specific ways. First, we should enact a program like that a number of us introduced last year in the Senate to provide tax incentives for private industry to build housing in poverty areas, to harness the great talents of private enterprise in constructing low-income housing. The fact is that the effort that has been made in the past has been directed almost solely by the federal government. In order to deal with this satisfactorily and adequately in the future, the only way really to do it is to bring in the private sector and bring in the private enterprise system. And the way to do that is, I think, through the kind of legislation that I offered in the Senate several years ago. The bill takes the root economic fact of life, that you cannot make a profit building good, low-cost housing, and supplies that profit in the form of tax credit and deductions and low-interest loans. In return for low-interest, long-term loans, a firm would agree to build or rehabilitate a certain number of units to be rented to low-income families. Through tax incentives, it affords a guaranteed return in depreciation, with the depreciation increasing depending on the amount of money, the amount of spend over 20 years. If you put all of the money up, if you put up the whole $1 million, then it's between fiscal and monetary policy. It will require us to resume the vigorous economic growth of the early 1960s. All these things can be done if we bring our ambitions more into harmony with our resources. Third, we must make good on our promise to cut down the enormous red tape and delay which has repeatedly slowed the construction of federal housing. Until a few months ago, it took up to 2 years to process the 221D3 projects, often long enough to render original cost estimates wholly inaccurate. This delay has in large part discouraged construction firms and architects from sold to another group, and that money is then used to reinvest in housing in the same locality or in the same area where these be paid. Thus, the attraction that home builders across America were being hurt by a severe labor shortage, which may soon pose as serious a... That would be the answer for would provide the most secure economic base possible for the industry. What this kind of program envisions, ultimately, is not a grandiose or far-fetched dream. It instead relies on just these elements that we have overlooked in our housing efforts in the past: the skill of private industry and the encouragement of private industry, the ability of local citizens to control their own future, the use of the unemployed as a resource instead of as a burden to the housing market. This is the kind of program that can begin to rebuild this country, not just physically, but spiritually, as well providing meaningful, important work while making decent housing a reality all across this country. This is the task that I ask you to join me in helping to begin. Thank you very much.
So, if I may, who has...
I think we face a great problem. I think if you had to talk about if you talked about three great problems crises that face the United States, I would say that was one of them. The war in Vietnam, the problems of race and the problems of violence, problems of basically our city and our poor, and the third is the financial crisis that the United States now faces. I don't know that he mentioned that it was the worst that it's been since 1931, or it was comparable to 1931. My feeling is that it's not as serious as that, but it is very, very serious. And my feeling also is that we're going to have a difficult time dealing with it until the war in Vietnam is either cut back or ended. $30 billion that we spend each year there, the $85 million a day that we spend there, counts for 60% of our outflow of gold, accounts for the deficit. We have an inflation now of about 4% in the United States, which is very, very serious, and the highest interest rates that we've had for 100 years. If that war could be brought to an honorable end, I think a lot of these problems would be alleviated. To have to try to start to deal with it. And I've outlined, I think, what the explanation in the background is, and what the frustration of those who were denied some of these opportunities because of the color of their skin. And so I think that was what was in the mind of Congress and those who supported this legislation. Obviously, it would be much better if you didn't have to have that legislation. Obviously, it would be much better if the federal government didn't have to take that action. And obviously, it would be much better if that kind of feeling didn't exist within the United States. But the fact is that it does, and it has created immense problems for part of our fellow Americans here in this country. And I suppose ultimately the federal government has to come in and try to help those citizens. That's the basis. Thomas Jefferson said that the rebellion amongst young people occasionally is not a bad thing. I think that you're going to have some young people, as we have some older people who abuse their privileges and abuse the rights and abuse the kinds of conditions that we have here in the United States. My feeling is that from the universities and colleges that I've visited across this country, that the vast majority of American students are very committed to the development of this country and very committed to trying to bring a nation. We said we'd go anytime and any place. Then one time we said to Ho Chi Minh we'd even go to Moscow. I think once we made it clear that we'd go anytime, any place, we should have said we'll go anytime, any place except Phnom Penh or Warsaw, or we shouldn't have said it. We shouldn't have said we'll go to Moscow, we're going any place else if we didn't mean it. And I think that we should get on with the talks. We're the most powerful nation in the world. We're not going to lose face. We've been talking to the Chinese in Warsaw for a decade, and this country's not going to lose face by going to some place and starting to have talks. The important thing is to end the war. The important thing is at least to see if we can end the war, and the only way we're going to find out whether we can end the war is to go to the negotiating table. Maybe it can't be ended. Maybe we're going to have to go back, and maybe the fighting is going to continue. But at least let's find out that
Over the next train.
Oh yeah, glad to see you.
keep moving here. Go ahead. Take it easy. Take it easy.
This is the hard part.
Just take it easy. Okay, go ahead slowly. Go ahead slowly. Very good. Back off.
Well, I'm sure if I had a bat in my hand, I'd know what to do with it. I kind of have mic fright, but I'm certainly glad to be here and help talk towards anything we can do for Senator Kennedy. He's a great man.
So the factory workers' average salary has gone up here in the United States and in the state of Indiana. The average factory worker is taking less home today than he did in 1965 because of inflation. I don't think that that's necessary. Of course, one of the great problems is the war in Vietnam. As long as the war continues, it causes tremendous spending by the United States government and causes these pressures of inflation. But it's still a fact that the country suffers economically. It's America's war. This is their war, the war of the South Vietnamese. We can go in and help them. We can assist them, but we cannot win it for them, and they have to win it for themselves, only with our assistance. And I don't think it's too much to ask them. I don't think it's acceptable that we should pay. And not just have these programs run by government, but bring the private enterprise system in an active way by tax credits and tax incentives so that they take over some of the efforts that are now being made by the federal government in Washington. Return the governing process to the people and themselves in their local communities, in the cities, and in the rural areas of the United States, and at the same time, ensure that we stand for peace around the rest of the globe. Ensure that our prestige and our position around the rest of the globe will be strengthened, so that people around in other
I come here to ask for your support. We have only 5 more days to this election, this all-important election here in the state of Indiana. I ask you to come and help over the period of the next few days. I ask you to come out and work.
She was over here.
Mr. Kennedy.
Nice to see you. Thank you very much.
Oh, look, hello.
Thanks very much. It's very nice to both my wife and I have been here. Enjoy it. Facilities are very nice. I've spoken a number of times about the problems of social security payments, which are really not adequate, I don't think, in the United States now. The increase in the cost of living going up so rapidly.
It's really
It's very, very difficult. It has a great effect on people who live on Social Security or people who live on fixed incomes in their elderly years, and whoever gets sick.
so many of us living alone, see, we're widows.
Yes.
A lot of us.
Well, in certain parts of the United States, that payment's only $55 a month. It was $45 a month. It's been raised to $55 a month. But I think it has to be for a widower. It has to be at least $100 a month. For a single person, the minimum should be $100 a month, and for a couple, it should be at least $160 a month.
Well, I don't get the minimum, I only get 47.
I know, which is not satisfactory. You twins?
No, we're not twins.
Over here, bro.
The next one's up.
Up. So, isn't that interesting? That's a long period of time. So it's nice to see all of you, and nice to have a chance to visit you in this nice home, nice house, and you're very courteous and very kind to all of us. So thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you for coming. I got a butt shaking.
That on TV?
Hey, man!
Very pleased to be in Ishawak.